Welcome, everybody. Good evening. It's a Friday evening here. I'm Dr. Bob, Dr. Bob Weathers, here with the Vitality Project, and have as a special guest tonight our dear friend, Angela Macleod.
Hi, Bob. Hi, everybody.
Nice to see you, Angela. Great to have you here. We are in the midst of material, covering material the last days that pertain to a workshop that we have tomorrow. And for any of you that have interest in tonight's conversation with Angela and me, you might have interest also in the workshop. It's tomorrow morning from 9 till 11 Pacific time, and it will be on some of the topics that we're talking about tonight and have been the last few days. We'll be going more in depth, and there'll be more kind of personal application for sure. But the material will be that we'll be fleshing out has been material that's been in our daily posts here for the last several days, and I'm planning to continue that for the several days past the workshop. So if you have interest in the workshop, please, I'll put up a banner later. You can go to Vitality Project Life and sign up for it. And it's meant to be a nominal fee. I think it's $10 to register for it. And when you register, you'll not only have access to the workshop tomorrow, but you'll have access to it when it is archived later on tomorrow. You'll have access to it to review later. And plus there's a bundle that we've included with it of reading materials, suggestions for video resources, as well as hopefully thought-provoking questions that will get you to inquire into your own experience and kind of apply the material. So all of that tomorrow. Just want to earmark that or bookmark it for you guys if you're interested. Would love to have you join us. All right, Angela. So tonight we're looking at one element, and I'll be talking about it tomorrow for sure. And I've come to call it the brain's stress seesaw. And you're well familiar with it from our conversations. I'll summarize it briefly, and then I'd just love to have you riff off of that wherever you want to go. You have many expertise that pertain directly to it. So the way I think about it, and it's a simplistic model, but it's meant to be guiding, I think, not only for individuals that are in active addiction or on their way into recovery from active addiction, but also for their loved ones. They can be very helpful to understand sometimes the force of an addictive behavior, whether it's the substance or some other compulsive behavior that we just can't seem to stop. And so the way it goes is this is the seesaw. I grew up in Texas where they called it a teeter-totter, but I think most everybody has some exposure to seesaws or teeter-totters in children's playgrounds. And if you think of the biology of our brain, especially as it focuses on the survival center of the brain, which is right between my earbuds, the midbrain, stress hormones in the body get activated whenever we're under threat. And so that can be an external threat, or sometimes it can be an internal threat. But when stress is evoked in the body, there are two chemicals, brain chemicals, that are most associated with that. They're both stress hormones. One is familiar to most everybody. It's adrenaline. And the second one, as you know, is cortisol. And when cortisol goes up on the teeter-totter, it's unsustainable. Most of us can't sustain that for very long without beginning to break down emotionally and then sometimes even physically. So that when that end goes up, the body and the brain can't tolerate that kind of imbalance. And so if we can find a way to balance it, that's a good thing. And one way to balance it out that's very quick, very effective, sometimes only short term, is to bring in another chemical, which is, it's inside our bodies, but if we can get that chemical to be released, it will push the teeter-totter the other direction. And that other chemical is familiar to anybody that's been here over time. And again, I know it's well familiar to you, Angela, and that chemical is dopamine. And dopamine is a neurotransmitter that actually, when it goes up, cortisol goes down, at least temporarily. I don't want to talk about what happens after that because that gets into a conversation about withdrawal, et cetera. But for right now, just to look at when stress goes up, I'm more inclined to reach for behaviors that will help regulate that teeter-totter. And so when you hear people talk about various kinds of addictions as self-medication or self-soothing, or even kind of anesthesia. It's really kind of to anesthetize the incredibly uncomfortable feelings that are associated with stress. And I realize I'm talking about them chemically. None of us walk around thinking, hey, Angela, are you having a dopamine kind of day? We have experiences of being relatively at peace or happy or being stressed out and so on. It's just that there's a chemical mirroring of our subjective experience. And sometimes for shorthand, I like to talk about the chemistry. It's very relevant, particularly to addiction to chemicals themselves, but any addictive behavior, any of our behaviors that we're drawn towards and sometimes have a hard time stopping, A, they're all associated with dopamine spikes, and B, many of them are in response to stress in our lives. And if we can help to, I think, kind of level the playing field when we talk about addictive behaviors, all of us have coping mechanisms. Some of those are more or less healthy for all of us, but all of us need to cope with day-to-day stresses. And right now is a time of incredible universal stress with COVID. Add that to the mix. And so it makes it a time of great vulnerability to addictions of all stripes. And so anyway, that's my introduction to the seesaw, and I won't speak much more right now. I'd like to invite any reflections that you have personally or in your clinical work, the work that you do as a teacher, as a meditator. I mean, just wherever you want to go with this, I'm interested to hear, Angela. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. I like the image of the teeter-totter. That's what I called it when I was a kid.
Yeah. Okay. I'm glad to know somebody else called it that. Yeah. That's great.
California, not Texas, but
okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. It is a fascinating subject, and I like the way that you make it accessible, the way that you've just explained it.
Thank you, Angela. Thank you.
And I have. Yeah, I personally, in my own experience, I couldn't tell you if I have cortisol or adrenaline or dopamine going on, but we have these sort of, we call them subjective experience, what we feel on the inside.
Yeah.
You know, we can also come to, I think a lot of what your work is helping people to become aware of what's going on. And so I think that's a good starting point for really to be able to choose something different rather than an addictive substance or behavior. First of all, it's like you said, it's actually very natural to want to bring that cortisol down.
Yeah.
You know, and you're right, it's not really physically possible to sustain that mode for very long. We're not designed to be able to do that. It's meant for a short burst of energy, really, to respond to a threat. And but in our normal day-to-day life, a lot of times those stresses kind of mount, or they are continual, and then we don't have maybe we didn't grow up in a place where we were modeled how to more naturally or in healthy ways to kind of put the seesaw, the teeter-totter in the other direction. And so for whatever reason, you know, when I share about this information with people, I am fascinated with the neuroscience, the relationship to our whole nervous system and the interaction with the hormones and everything you just described. But I think it can be helpful for most people, what we call ourselves lay people. We're not scientists, to be able to identify from the inside what it feels like to have that adrenaline. And probably most people can relate to that that rush of adrenaline and the butterflies in the stomach, the clenching up, you know, of the musculature, the heartbeat pounding, that kind of thing. And so that's what we actually experience. And so the thrust for me, as I've become more aware of my own patterns in my body that relate to the things that drive me to want to reach for alcohol or some other unhealthy coping mechanism, it sort of seems logical. Oh, well, then what else can I do to help my body regulate chemically and, you know, in terms of those cortisol, adrenaline chemicals.
Yeah.
Or on a nervous system level, you know, the fight or flight mode, the freeze, fawn mode, and to try to bring that into what can I do in my moment to moment, day to day life. So for me, as I read your post today, I was thinking about, well, what do I reach for nowadays? I have this mixture of what I would say healthy things that I now reach for or try to do in response. And then there's things that aren't maybe as healthy or that I'm kind of watching. Like, for example, I have a tendency to want to sort of collapse by watching TV, you know, to zone out.
Yeah.
And that's a way to kind of get the body to calm down. The other one that's a little bit newer for me is how I feel when I go shopping. And I mentioned that before to you. And I've been really watching that and observing, you know, what's going on preceding, you know, when I decide that I'm going to go shopping. And what I've noticed, for the most part, I haven't been shopping in an immediate response to being stressed. It's not like, oh, I got to go shop right now. But when I need to go shopping, I notice how I feel like, I get to go shopping. I get to go shopping. And I watch how it feels when I'm doing it. There's something really familiar about it. I'm the shopper for the family here at my house. I'm good at it. I'm an efficient shopper, etc. But it feels like there's something piggybacking on that right now. I think it's also because of COVID. I'm at home a lot, and so I get to go out. You know, so now the sort of the loneliness or the feeling kind of stuck in the house that's sort of stressful at times, that going out to go shopping, being around people, even though I can't really relate to them very much. So in a way, those are all very understandable triggers or, you know, impulses. But if it gets out of hand, then I start to shop more than I really need to, just so I can get that feeling of relief. And so that's a more current one. Some of the positive things that I do are basically breathing slower, because that's so immediately accessible and it's so simple. So one of the things I notice when I'm having that adrenaline, cortisol inner experience is I stop breathing. I start kind of shut down like this, or I'm breathing really shallow. And so if I can just pause, and that wonderful word, pause, you know, that I learned in AA first, to pause before you react. And now I add to that, breathe. You know, don't just freeze, pause, but breathe in, hold the breath for a moment, and then exhale really slowly, you know, numbers of times. The reason I like that one so much is I can do that just about anywhere. And there's other things I do, like bouncing, shaking the energy out, but there's situations where I don't really feel comfortable doing that, you know. So again, it's been a really wonderful thing to me to explore the different ways that are healthy, fun, you know. Sometimes they're even fun to do. Like I love to do qigong and yoga type movements. And there's just millions of different things. People who like to sing, you know, these are all ways that can, it's almost like you have to tell those chemical systems through your nervous system, you have to tell them it's okay now. We can relax. Because in our modern lifestyle, the button gets pushed, turned on, and then there seems to be no turning down of the dial. And so those are some of the thoughts that were coming up as I was listening to you.
Thank you. There's so much rich resource there and very practical. I really appreciate that, Angela. Thank you. You know, as I was listening to you, I was recalling over the last several years as I've presented this material in different contexts, most often to groups of men and women who are early in recovery, oftentimes from severe addiction. And I've had any number of people say they literally had never made the connection between stress on the one hand, stress in their bodies, stress in their minds, and reaching out to some kind of addictive antidote. And so just that awareness, you know, you mentioned awareness earlier on, just that awareness gives us a very practical leg up, it seems like to me, if we're enslaved in some kind of addictive behavior, or unhealthy coping mechanism of whatever kind, just to almost pre-pave it the way that you're talking about. What are ways that I can offset this stress other than wait till I'm to a point where I'm going to pop? And oftentimes for people that have addictions, particularly to substances, by that point, I say they're over the waterfall. They're too far gone.
Yeah.
If we can catch this earlier and almost like inoculate ourselves. There's, in the literature of psychology, there's this idea of stress inoculation. And I was thinking of that also as you were speaking. There's a way that we can lower our baseline stress levels by engaging in behaviors. You mentioned yoga, and I know that you're a practitioner of yoga and Qigong, a very specialized movement that really makes a difference if one practices that. You know that both you and I practice some form of mindfulness meditation and have for years. There's so much research to indicate that we can lower our baseline stress levels so that when we face something like what's going on right now, let's say, just a global crisis around the limitations and hardships associated with quarantine and this awful virus, then we have a bit more buffering for that. And COVID aside, all of us deal with, situational stressors. It might be work for one person, it might be relationship for another, but to have some resources in our toolkit, I think I really support your being very practical. I think if you understand this seesaw that we're talking about, this teeter-totter, if you understand this, then it really is immediately implied, what do I need to do to reduce stress? It's one of the first things I work with clients in either when I'm working with them individually, in recovery coaching, or in groups that I lead, education groups, is I just ask them, I say, what's the most stressful thing going on for you right now? And before you came into treatment, if that's the case, what was most stressful for you? And they're readily identified just a handful of things that are very common for all of us. And so then we set about practically to find ways to reduce those stressors. And lo and behold, addictive behaviors, even cravings, can begin to lose their death grip on us. There's no magic bullet in this whole field, as you and I know, but this is something that we can all participate in. And especially if it's practiced habitually over time, I can get to where I can handle stressors without reaching for addictive behaviors more and more consistently. That's really encouraging to me. And I have client after client telling me that this connection was one of those really instrumental insights for them. You'd think that all of us know this. I didn't know this. I can think about growing up. I can remember being in graduate school and being so stressed out all the time. There was so much work and it was endless. It was 6 years unending. There were times I'd get stressed out and I'd engage in various addictive behaviors, whether it would be drinking a bit too much that night or some other addictive behavior. Oftentimes for me, it would just be like I'd be lost in procrastination. I'd have this whole deluge of assignments I had to complete, and I'd find myself fiddling around playing piano. And there's nothing wrong with playing piano as a reward for studying, but I can't do piano as a substitute for studying or I won't finish my degree. So anyway, and I think about this oftentimes. I don't think I had much awareness of it. It was just like, that's interesting. I'm playing piano for an hour and I just lost an hour of reading time or whatever. So I think awareness really does help.
I was thinking about mindfulness and meditation practice too. And when I was really early in recovery, I believed that meditation would be really important for sort of my holistic approach. And I found it extremely difficult to sit still. And I still don't find that to be really easy to just sit down on a cushion for 30 minutes or something. Sometimes even 5 minutes seems like a lot to sit still. And I realized as I listen inside of my body what my inner experience is and was, especially in early recovery with pause, is that on button or the on dial for the stress response. So when you have that stressed energy and you're trying to get yourself to sit still, it's almost torturous. And I felt like, oh, there's something wrong with me. I can't sit here. And I would say something to somebody about it, and they'd say, well, meditation is hard for everybody. You just have to do it and it gets easier. And I tried often and tried different kinds of meditations. And what I came to realize in studying the nervous system a little bit more is that when that on button is on, sometimes it's more helpful to actually go with that energy of needing to move. So not move in an unhealthy way like rage or do something, but maybe jogging or doing some high intensity exercise. The leptin system,
Yeah.
it's almost like completing something that got started,
Yeah.
and then the body can come into a more relaxed state.
Yeah.
So now what I do is I do Qigong, which is a mindful movement practice. And in that practice, I come to stillness physically. And so for me, that's become more of my normal way of just sort of having a practice where I do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Everyone.
it's very individual, what might work for me might not for somebody else. And so that's partly why I think it's really valuable to experiment and to, not give up. Like if you believe that meditation is going to be the ticket for you, but you're not able to do it, there could be hundreds of other ways to work with this inner energy, and to not give up on finding what works for you.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, thank you for this latter suggestion. It makes me think of nature shows I've seen where animals, when they've survived the attack of a predator, let's say if they've outrun a predator, I'm just thinking of various examples, they'll oftentimes shake, just they'll do Qigong to let it move from their system, and then they settle back in, and then they're back to a regulated place. I think you and I both have instincts this way. We've both been very active in our lives physically. You as a dancer, among other things, and I as a drummer, among other things, and I think it's really served me well. I can remember as a teenager, sometimes I would just drop to the floor and do a bunch of push-ups because I just felt this energy and I had to get it out,
Yeah.
It was that, or maybe aggress, like you said, and I didn't want to do that. So, yeah.
Another thing that I recognized for myself that I think is pretty applicable here too is I did take a mindfulness course, actually the mindfulness-based stress reduction.
Yeah.
And within that course, we would do long periods of mindfulness, or long for me anyway.
Yeah.
But what I noticed was, and I marveled at this, at home by myself, I had a really hard time doing a mindfulness practice by myself. But when I'd go to the group and we'd sit together, I could do it. I just was there. I would just slot in. And for me, I wasn't just in my own little bubble. I had this sense of the group support.
Yeah.
And so then again, I've become aware of how, for most of us, some way of co-regulating or being able to be with other people that we feel safe with, or the context feeling safe, can also be a way. Like we don't have to do it all on our own, all by ourselves. We're not meant to. We're not designed to. And so being selective about who we're with, and being able to bring our nervous systems together, and that can help bring those cortisol things down.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that in as well. It's one of the wishes here, Angela, you and I are active in many ways here at the Vitality Project, including the group that we were in last night together, and tomorrow morning's workshop, these regular events for you and me. Really, that's one of the wishes here, is to provide resources for self-regulation, and we certainly have even tonight your suggestions, but also that we really embrace so-called co-regulation, that we can support one another. I'm going to need to scoot in just a minute, but I want to thank you. I want to thank you for your contributions tonight. I feel like they're really practical, and I want to invite anybody to join us in our groups. We have weekly groups here. We have these meetings, these podcasts several times a week, lots of resources, daily podcasts in terms of information, much of which is directed towards either self-regulation suggestions and or co-regulation. And I also want to recommend to anybody that wants to follow up with Angela on anything that you've mentioned, you can reach out to her and or me through the Vitality Project homepage on Facebook, also on YouTube. So there's lots of ways that you can be in contact. Angela has a tremendous amount to offer, and I'd love to have you all be in contact with her. I know that she'll be very generous in providing ideas and encouragement and support for you. So thank you, Angela. Thanks for being with us tonight. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I wish everybody a good evening, a good weekend. I hope to see you tomorrow, Angela.
I'll be there.
Yeah, thank you. Look forward to being able to spend more time with you. Thank you, everybody, tonight. Have a safe weekend. Be well, and come back and join us again soon. Take care, everybody. Good night, Angela.
Bye.
Bye-bye.